Cruisers are one of the most important class of ships in the game. And if you've ever wondered, what premium cruiser should I pick up, today I'm going over my top 5 premium cruisers. Now, the caveats for this list is that we are only including ships that are currently available. If there is a cruiser that is not normally available year-round or has been removed, like some of the ones that are only available in Santa containers or in the Black Friday event, they are not going to be on this list. These are cruisers that you can go into the shop right now, either the Armory or the Premium shop, and pick up if you have the resources or doubloons for them. And again, these are only my top 5 cruisers. There's a whole lot of excellent cruisers in this game. This isn't an all-inclusive list. If you are looking for an all-inclusive list of cruisers and where I would rank them, you can check out my Ultimate Cruisers List video where I go over darn near every single cruiser in the game and rank them A to F. Well, actually S to F, I should say. But anyway, top 5 cruisers. Let's go ahead and get going. But before we do, if you do find yourself enjoying this video, if you find it informational, entertaining, or just, again, enjoy it, make sure you drop a like and leave a comment before you click off. And why not subscribe while you're down there? Now, let's go ahead and get on into it with number 5, which is the Tier 10 American Heavy Cruiser, the Salem. You could also probably put, not probably, you could also put Des Moines here as well. Both the Des Moines and Salem are fairly comfortable ships to use, especially once you get used to their playstyle. They are usually found behind islands, using their absolute catapult shell arcs to throw their shells over the top of islands and rain down upon the enemy team. Now, the Des Moines and Salem, they both have 203mm guns with auto-loading guns. And I don't mean by auto-loading the funny F button, I mean in real life they were auto-loading turrets. In game that translates to a very, very, very high DPM. And included with the utility of the Salem and the Des Moines, depending upon which you have, their consumables are a little bit different, but they both have high degrees of utility, both having radar, and the Des Moines gets radar and hydro, but with the Salem you have to swap that out. But anyway, with those high degrees of utility, you also get the Mark 8 Super Heavy American AP shell for her 203mm guns, which gives her improved pin angles and allows these 203mm guns to hit a lot harder than you might expect them to. So when you do find cruisers or battleships that are showing you their side, you load up the AP in the Salem or the Des Moines, and you just watch the enemy ship just get annihilated in front of you. It is truly a glorious thing. One of the biggest mistakes you can do in this game is showing your side to a Des Moines or a Salem. Now, talking specifically about the Salem, why I would usually recommend it over the Des Moines, the Salem is a lot more new player friendly because you get a super heal with the Salem. One of the big downsides of the Des Moines is that, yes, it's got this high DPM, high degree of utility, but, I mean, if you look at the ship, it stands up out of the water and it's not really that well armored. Any of you battleship mains out there, myself included, we love seeing broadside Des Moines and Salems and Worcesters, or really any American cruiser, because we know, besides like the British cruisers, catch one of these suckers broadside, you're probably going to delete 2/3 of its HP, unless RNG just hates you. And where the Des Moines, if you have that happen to you while you're playing the Des Moines, your run's pretty much over and you're going to be stuck in the back trying to, lob shells at your maximum range. But with the Salem, you can recover from that with your super heal and get back in the fight. There's been so many games where I've goofed up in the Salem, but I've still managed to contribute to the match meaningfully because I can keep playing with that super heal. So that's excellent right there. Salem is also the better choice in my opinion, because in competitive, it's much more viable than the Des Moines. We have so many ships now that can just punch through the armor of the Des Moines. But with the Salem, again, with that super hill in competitive, it can be a nice little cockroach cruiser that you really got to focus down when you see it, because if not, he's going to slink away, pop his super hill, and then be back up to darn near full health by the time that heal gets done running. So yes, excellent cruisers there. Salem is available for coal. Des Moines is available for, well, grinding. So yeah, if you do have the Des Moines and you're just, you're just good with the Des Moines, you're happy with it. I'm not seeing go drop what you're doing right now to get the Salem. Conversely, if you have the Salem and you just don't want a slightly more higher degree of utility with the Des Moines, you don't really need to go up and grind the American Heavy Cruiser line unless you just want to, right? So either or, they can share this spot. Going on down to number 4, we have the Tier 10 Soviet cruiser, good old Stalingrad. I mean, Stalingrad is something. She's had quite the run in the game. She started out life as being literally the poster child for Russian bias with how crazy she was back in the day, but she has been directly and indirectly nerfed as time has gone on, like we were talking about with Saturday's video. This is not the same game as it was back in 2018, and that is never more evident than here with the Stalingrad, because she's gone from being such a godly cruiser to being just a really friggin' strong cruiser today. And yes, she is still 100% worth it in my opinion, especially if you just like bullying people in random battles. She has Soviet bias shells which fly through the air with the greatest of ease because of their almost non-existent air drag coefficient, right? And the way the Soviet shells work is that they're actually short fuse, but their armor pin values are so incredibly high that even though they're short fuse AP, where any other similar shell with the fuse as short as the Soviet shells have would just, maybe net you some okay-ish pin damage or not have enough pin to get through the armor. Because the pins are so high with the Soviet shells, they can penetrate and still do great damage, and in fact can still citadel even at long ranges. So the Stalingrad guns are excellent at murdering just about everything, including light cruisers. It's kind of funny, one of the best counters for Smolensk back in the day, when Smolensk or Smolensky, whatever the plural version of Smolensk is, were running around, you could just blap them with a Stalingrad from pretty much any angle and they're going to cease to exist because of that. So you got those excellent guns there. And on top of that too, you have, especially back in the day, a ship that is in a cruiser slot that is tanky, just as tanky or even tankier than battleships are at tier 10. It's really like you got a tier 9 battleship in a cruiser slot there, especially back in the day. Now, what has gone wrong for Stalingrad is that there's been many global changes. Probably the most painful one for it was the commander rework, when cruisers lost the ability to build into their survivability, meaning they couldn't get those burn times down like they used to back in the day, because Stalingrad used to have a normal cruiser burn time. But then they gave it a battleship burn time, removed the ability to build into survivability, and now it burns really, really easily. So you can focus it down with HE and it's gonna die. Add that to the fact that its sides have always been super vulnerable to any type of mean AP shell. Yeah, it's nowhere near as tanky as it used to be. Still get the 12-kilometer radar with Stalingrad, still get DFAA, you still can put Kuznetsov on it to increase its survivability. You still have your amazing 305mm Soviet bias guns. So it is still an incredible ship in today's World of Warships. She is a still ship, so she does come with a pretty high price tag, which is why she's back here at number 4. If you could get this thing for coal, this would be like number 2 or maybe even number 1 on this list, but it does have, again, a very high price tag. So again, you want to bully some guys in random battles, definitely pick up the Stalingrad. Alright, next up at number 3, we have the Tier 8 Japanese heavy cruiser, the Atago, one of the oldest premiums in this game. The Atago is a ship that has truly stood the test of time, because unlike the Stalingrad that hasn't really aged that well, Atago's still fantastic. I mean, it's just good in today's World of Warships. She has so much going for her, and her characteristics have aged so well that you would think this is a ship that came out last week. So many ships come out nowadays, and you don't really see them too much after they get released, because they either get out-gimmicked or they age incredibly poorly. So the Atago, thankfully, is not in that boat. She still has her 10 203mm guns with her Japanese HE Alpha. If you don't know, the Japanese shells have a higher alpha rate, meaning that even if you don't set a fire on the target, you're going to be doing a nice bit of damage just through the sheer alpha damage of the shells. But they do have a great fire chance on them because, well, Japanese shells, right? You have a 17% fire chance base with 10 shells. So, you can throw some flags out there, you can even build into it, get that fire chance up, and you're going to be burning down ships, no problem. Add to the fact that once you build into it too, she has a 9.3 kilometer detection range, which is just incredibly stealthy for a cruiser, period. Let it be a heavy cruiser or a light cruiser. So you can sneak up on some fools with the Atago. You can also disappear when you need to, because when you have somewhat that great, you can literally decide, okay, I don't want to be spotted anymore, and you just stop firing. 20 seconds later, your bloom goes down, and you're undetected. Now, if anything is within that 10 kilometers, it's either a DD or a submarine. And yeah, submarines, that's a little thorn in the side of most ships nowadays, so it's not really one thing that affects the Atago. But if there's a destroyer within that range, she's kind of dumb, because the Atago's shells are very comfortable at their maximum range, let alone 9.3 kilometers away. And with the Japanese HE Alpha, you will murder any DD that is dumb enough to get within 10 kilometers of you quite easily. She also gets torpedoes that have better torpedo angles than her heavy cruiser counterparts. If you play the Japanese cruiser line, you know that you pretty much have to show flat broadside to get your torpedoes out, which can be a death sentence, shall we say, in most situations with Japanese cruisers. Atago, you got a little bit more wiggle room there, so that's very good. And she's just, again, aged so well. She has hydroacoustic search. She's very maneuverable, too. If you want to build into her maneuverability, she can get, I believe, either just at or just under a 3-second rudder shift time, which she definitely needs because, like other Japanese heavy cruisers, she has some weird geometry about her, which means that if you shoot it and hit it with a larger caliber battleship gun, you're probably going to ruin the Atago player's day. But with a 3-second rudder shift time and a 9.3 kilometer detection range, you can definitely dance around that and, again, decide to, just disappear after a couple of shells land a little bit too close for comfort. But a wonderfully fun ship, great at burning down tier 10 battleships and tier 10 cruisers, great for dealing with DDs, and, again, just a great ship. She is available for doubloons right now in the armory, so if you have the hankering for that, you can go pick her up there. And now, going on down to number 2, we have the Tier 8 American light cruiser, the San Diego. So, the San Diego is a ship I was very, very excited to see come out when she was released. She is basically a much, much more comfortable Atlanta. The Atlanta is a Tier 7 American light cruiser. These ships are so ridiculous looking, it's hard to believe that they were real. They were originally designed as destroyer leaders, so really a big destroyer, which is why they have a ridiculous amount of 5-inch turrets strapped to their decks. And, I mean, in real life, too, it's a fun fact, in real life, too, they wanted to bolt more of these 5-inch turrets to the Atlanta class, but they couldn't because the ship would become ridiculously top-heavy by the amount of not only turrets, but the amount of gun directors they would have had to have bolted onto the ships if they wanted to add a couple more turrets to them. So, yeah, just a ridiculous amount of DACA on these ships. Now, the Atlanta, though, is not the most comfortable light cruiser to play. You have the American shell arcs, which are ridiculous. Great for hiding behind an island. Great for getting those shells over islands like we've seen with the Des Moines and the Salem. But they're incredibly, incredibly floaty, especially these 5-inch shells. So you have to lead the targets by a ridiculous amount. You have to be constantly firing. So there's always a line of shells going back to right where you are. And because there's a light cruiser, it has basically no armor. It's really just a destroyer with a citadel, right? So the Atlanta is very easy to just blap once you find it out in the open. If played right, it can be quite fearsome, but very unforgiving for mistakes. The San Diego, on the other hand, is at Tier 8. It gets sap, it has slightly better armor, and it gets a heal. So it's more comfortable to play. You get sap, which is just great at doing damage to pretty much darn near everything. And on top of that too, you do get a reload booster, so you have hyper DACA for a few seconds, and you can really do some damage with those sap shells when you've got the reload booster going, especially to destroyers, which this thing's great for absolutely murdering. In addition to that as well, she does get DFAA, and given the fact that you have a just ridiculous amount of 5-inch guns, you have 16 5-inch guns on this ship that are all dual purpose. If you want a carrier to simply leave you alone, just smack the DFAA button, and even against tier 10 carriers, you are going to be taking a good amount of their planes with you. So, great for that. A much more comfortable Atlanta, a fun historical ship, one ship I was very excited to see released, and I still jump into it from time to time today. If you can't tell by most of this list, I'm more of a heavy cruiser fella, but this is one light cruiser that I keep finding myself to come back to as well. Oh, and you can get Halsey, of course, and slap Halsey on the San Diego. Once you pop Confederate, you get that boost to your main battery reload time, and then now you're really frickin' pushing those sap shells out at a stupidly fast rate. So yes, all in all, a great tier 8 light cruiser. And that brings us now to our number 1 slot, which is, of course, the one, the only, the Napoli. Napoli is just such a dumb ship. It's incredible that they buffed it and they haven't changed it since then. Like, I don't want to say this too loud because I'm really enjoying 11 kilometer secondary Napoli, but it's a little bit broken. This thing is such a source of DPM from its secondaries, because the secondary guns for the Italian ships, if you guys don't know, most of them are 90mm guns, and 90mm HE is very lackluster in its pinning capabilities. But 90mm SAP is much better. It can pin a whole hell of a lot more than those 90mm HE shells can. So with the Napoli, you can pin most of what you run into right off the bat. And she gets crawling smoke. And as you guys know, secondaries fired in smoke don't increase your detection range. So you can pop your crawling smoke. Well, that's not crawling smoke, it's exhaust smoke. So you can be moving at full tilt with your exhaust smoke, pop your little fighter or spotter, and just let your secondaries melt whatever it is around you. You don't have to worry about firing your main battery guns, because that will get you detected in smoke. So you can do that with the Napoli, and these suckers have an 11 kilometer range now, which is a little bit ridiculous in my opinion, but okay, I mean, yeah. Now, that by itself would be like, okay, it's a heavy cruiser with good secondaries, but like, it's still a cruiser, right? You can still blap it. Well, dear viewer, you can't really, because the Napoli is so freaking well armored, it doesn't really care much about battleship shells, as long as the driver of the Napoli knows to angle, which isn't really hard to do. It's not like it's a slug or anything, it's a fairly maneuverable cruiser. So long as you stay angled to battleships, you can bounce most of the shells that get thrown at you, which is why this thing's so friggin' popular in clan battles. Unless you've got some ridiculously large guns like the Vermont, or, you know, those other 457 battleships like a Yami or something, it's just so maneuverable that it's going to bounce most of your shells. And even then, when you have those ships with those 457s and such, you still got to catch it at the right angle for the damage to really, you know, for the shells to really bite into the armor. So, yeah, and then add to the fact that, again, you got the exhaust smoke, so you can just go undetected whenever you want to. It's got the SAP secondary, so it can keep the destroyers at bay. Or if you have to, God forbid, push into a Napoli, it's just going to melt you down with those secondaries. And add to the fact that, like, its guns are still pretty solid as well. You know, they got the Italian AP shells, which, if you've never ran into an Italian ship that uses their AP, it's kind of in the same boat as the French AP, high velocity, packs a punch and such, and they're still 254mm guns, right? So they are quite large, especially by cruiser standards. So yeah, torpedoes to boot as well. It's got those Italian 13-kilometer torps that you can either use them to do a rush on the enemy ship, or again, if you're having to kite into the Napoli, they can throw that behind them, and if you're kiting into them, you might, you know, get distracted and accidentally run into a couple of those, and there goes, you know, another 13, 14k damage off of your ship, right, as you're being farmed down by the SAP secondary guns. So yeah, Napoli is like one of the best, if not the best, brawling cruiser in the game at the moment. I believe it's only beaten in terms of SAP secondary DPM by the Michelangelo, which has just an absurd amount of SAP secondaries on it as well. But her secondary range is much shorter than the Napoli's secondary range. So, yeah. I'm really surprised this thing hasn't gotten nerfed yet. And I'll shut up about talking about that, because knowing my luck, I'll say this, and then like they'll release a dev blog saying they're going to pull back the Napoli's range or reload time the secondaries or something like that. So guys, those are my top 5 premium cruisers. Let me know in the comments down below, what are your top 5 premium cruisers? What ships would you have added to this list? What ships would you have removed from this list? Hope you guys have a wonderful Monday and wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.